Here's what I know about Tim. He likes to get drunk and show up to fire scenes unannounced. He also likes to, in the showers with his other firemen, act like he's drinking all the water and then just spit it up. Just drink it all and then just spit it up and then just drink it all. There's plenty of shower heads, Tim. Go over there. Why do you have to bathe right next to me?
Well, when you put it that way, I'm really sad about losing Tim. I kind of hadn't really thought about it in totality.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane...
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we love when growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I'm one of your 3 co-hosts, Roger Roper, and alongside me are my 2 co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Backdraft Lyons.
You go, we go.
And each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out a race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of each podcast, the 3 of us will provide you, the audience, with a number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. It's how we grow the podcast. And also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, and Game of Thrones. Westworld, right around the corner. We're super excited for that. And that's why, Big D, you were on vacation. People were asking where you were, how you were doing. You're back though. Yes. I thought you weren't going to come back to Westworld. You're coming off vacation early. Did you miss us that much?
I did actually miss you guys, and it wasn't so much as a vacation. It was just needed some time at home. So people don't realize the amount of hours that we put into this. And Westworld coming up, knowing that was going to eat up just 10 weeks of my time. Just had some things to do at home, but I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, I want to thank Carrie Gross for filling in for the past 8 to 10 weeks. She's been very well received by the audience, and Gene, you had mentioned that she's enjoying the fact that she's not doing this movie, but she really has grown an attachment to Big D.
Well, yeah, Big D's like a mentor to her, and has now given her the reins of Instagram, where she is, which I thought was hilarious. That even though she's not watching Backdraft along with us and recording it, still promoting the hell out of it. So kudos to Carrie for keeping us afloat on social media as you guys attack Twitter and I just kind of hide.
Well, Big D, it's been a while since I've asked you this question, but what movie are we doing this evening?
So this was recommended by a firefighter who listens to us, and unfortunately, I went back and looked. I couldn't find the email, so maybe it was a Twitter direct message. But a firefighter said he watches it at the fire station with the other firemen, and they wanted something to do with fire. So he wanted to do Always, Turk 182, Trespass, and the winner in a landslide wasn't even close, 1991's Backdraft.
No, you said they listen to the podcast or they watch these movies at the fire station?
Well, I imagine not every firehouse has fires just breaking out all the time. So they probably have a lot of hours to sit around. So you figure once a week they could watch a movie and listen to us talk for an hour.
One of the interesting things, Big D, as you mentioned, is structure fires are more and more rare. And so firefighters generally have to do more medical calls than anything, like welfare checks and stuff. And so I think it's really interesting that I was trying to imagine this movie if it was made like realistically. And they just went on a lot of calls, people who are like, oh, I have an irregular heartbeat. I think I might have a kidney stone, something like that. I mean, if you talk to an actual firefighter, they'll tell you that they get excited, as these guys did, about actual fires.
It's interesting about firefighters is for civil servants, they're like the most respected, right? Because you call them, they come, they don't give you any kind of ticket, they usually like help you and assist you. They're not, people have, a lot of people have adversity to authoritative police officers, but everyone seems to just love firefighters. I remember in college, I rode on the back of a fire truck in the University of Florida mascot suit, and it was like the best experience of my entire life. It was awesome. Every firefighter I've ever met has been pretty cool.
Minutes later, they found your underwear tangled up in the fire hose as they were trying to extend it.
That's exactly correct. Well, Backdraft is a 1991 American drama film directed by Ron Howard and written by Gregory Wyden. The film stars Kurt Russell, William Baldwin, also known as Billy, right? Billy Baldwin?
Mm-hmm.
Scott Glenn, Jennifer Jason Leigh, Rebecca De Mornay, Donald Sutherland, and Robert De Niro. It is about Chicago firefighters on the trail of a serial arsonist. The film grossed $77.9 million domestically and $74.5 million in foreign markets for a total gross of $152.4 million, making it the highest grossing film about firefighters until I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry in 2007. The film received 3 Academy Award nominations for God knows what reasons. What are your memories of this movie? Where were you when you first saw this?
So I don't remember watching this the first time, but I had to have, because the things I took away from it was, if you're in a fire, you got to touch the door handle to see if it's hot. And if you park in front of a fire hydrant, they're going to break your windows and stick the hose through it.
Do you guys remember, like, in 1991, it's when everybody started putting together their home theaters. Like, that was the big thing in the early 90s. And so I remember it was our first, like, big home purchase, and we got the big receiver and then the huge, speakers set up, and you still had your CRT TV, but we were trying to convince ourselves that this was just as good an experience as the theater. And so we had the surround sound that was really big. And I remember this was the perfect movie for people to demonstrate the capabilities. You go to Best Buy and everyone was putting Backdraft on. So my mom rented this movie, and I'm sitting there with the surround sound thinking, this is so real. It started making me go through like fire scenarios in my head. I planned escape routes out of the house, and I actually lived in the basement of our condo, so it was really terrifying after watching this movie. But none of those scenarios ever played out. And unfortunately, the movie is not what I remember from my childhood. It is not this all-encompassing, super realistic experience.
Yeah, I do remember this movie consistently being on in the AV section of Best Buy. I think it was Backdraft, Waterworld. There were like 3 other movies that were attached to it that I guess enhance or to showcase the stereo's capabilities. I remember that. And I remember Universal Studios had a show about Backdraft. That's it. I've never seen this movie. That's the only. Those were what I had to go on. This is my first time ever watching this movie, and we'll get into it. But this is. I am not looking forward to many Ron Howard films after this.
Yeah, I think this was the first time in about 20 years, and definitely my last.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, Big D, why don't you go ahead and play that trailer? Turn up your speakers.
It's like organized confusion. Over 300-400 degrees in temperature. And then you just got these guys that are running into this building. Everybody else is running out. And these lunatics are running in.
Is that a real Chicago fireman's outfit I see on you?
It's in the blood, Willie.
When I heard that both McCaffrey brothers were being assigned here at this station together, my heart was filled with a sudden desire to transfer.
Run, damn you! Let's just have one drill, Lieutenant. Now one for the company and one for me.
You have a bad day here, somebody dies.
Check that door for heat.
I mean, is that an accident or is it arson?
I'll get that answer as soon as I do.
We're starting to get the feeling that your office is dragging out this case.
Chances that you take. How do we know if the floor's gonna be on fire on one of these?
Well, when the door's open, if it's hot, don't get out.
Show me your fire truck.
So you punched out a window for ventilation. Was that before or after you noticed you were standing in a lake of gasoline? You shouldn't have had him up there in the first place. You burned him, Steven!
Got a stone killer trying to make a point.
Three guys have died already this year because of the cuts made by your task force. I'm not gonna quit, Steven, you hear me?
Well, two firefighters of Engine 17 of the Chicago Fire Department are brothers. Lieutenant Stephen Bull McCaffrey, the elder, is experienced, while Brian has labored under his brother's shadow his entire life. Brian returns to firefighting in Chicago after a number of other failed careers falter, though Stephen has doubts that Brian is fit to be a firefighter. In 1971, Brian witnesses the death of their firefighting father, Captain Dennis McCaffrey, while accompanying him on a call.
So this makes me worry about the Han Solo movie coming out for Star Wars.
Yes.
Because if you say Ron Howard, people are like, oh, he's a good director.
Mm-hmm.
But watching this movie, because this is earlier on in his career, everything he does is so like 1950s, like syrupy. Oh, gosh. It's like Opie Taylor. The dialogue between the kids, the overly inspirational, like joyful music when the fucking apartment building's on fire. Nothing he does seems grounded in reality or gritty. It just seems like a soda pop commercial.
It's almost as if his frame of reference for acting and directing came as a result of his experience on like an early 70s, mid 70s sitcom about like the 50s.
Yeah, I'm surprised there aren't more firefighters in leather jackets beating on jukeboxes throughout the movie. But the thing is just like you guys said, in the 90s, I think the audience was hungry for this sort of thing. I think there was sort of, the 80s had its vibe, that kind of quirky, nerdy, flashy vibe. And then in the 90s, they really wanted to get back to Americana. And I remember there was this longing and sort of an admiration of old Hollywood, and Marilyn Monroe was a big deal, and James Dean there was a resurgence of that where people were kind of idolizing that old Hollywood. And I think that he kind of got caught up in that, and I'm really glad that in the mid 90s Tarantino and others came along that kind of pushed back in the other direction.
Well, all right, other movies that came out in 1991, which we've done on this podcast: Terminator 2: Judgment Day, Silence of the Lambs, Cape Fear.
We didn't do Silence of the Lambs.
No, I'm just saying other movies in 1991. Some of them we've done on the podcast. Cape Fear, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Point Break, Boys in the Hood, The Rocketeer, City Slickers, The Addams Family, What About Bob, Hook, Thelma and Louise, Hot Shots, The Last Boy Scout, New Jack City, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Secret of the Ooze. So, I mean, in comparison, I see where there's some movies that, yes, like The Rocketeer, going back to like old school Americana, or Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, like these were the equivalent of today's superhero movies. These were the summer blockbusters. It's like Top Gun for firefighters. Only, Big D, you mentioned this to me, this movie didn't make you want to be a firefighter.
Yeah, no, this was the opposite of Top Gun. Top Gun probably made people want to join the Air Force. Here they had even the nicknames. Top Gun, we had Maverick and Goose. Here we had, Stephen Bull McCaffrey and Shadow and Axe. But it did not want me to be a fireman. I'm going to end up living on a boat, divorced, drinking shitty beer. It didn't glamorize the life of a fireman.
Actually, it was the Navy.
Yeah, nobody wants to join the Navy. You want to be an aviator.
But the fires, I mean, I see what they did. They took some explosions and they wrote a movie around it, I think is what they went for. And they were making this attempt to sort of marry the heroic and the gritty. And I understood, what I felt like was I can see the blueprint of this movie as I'm watching it. I know exactly where they're going with it. And the execution is just clunky. But like, again, if you get back to it, I feel bad for everybody who was involved in production on this movie, because the sound was actually pretty good for a 90s movie. The fires looked amazing. Even the victims of the fires, I was like, oh, that's pretty gnarly. And I can almost feel the heat jumping off the screen, but I couldn't feel anything from the actors. They weren't emoting. The story didn't make sense. And that's where I think it fell apart. But I don't think that's what they were going for. This is kind of the worst of the worst when it comes to a sort of an action thriller. As they said, fuck the story. Let's just go with some explosions.
They were trying to make us care about the firemen. And you got to do that, but they made it overly complicated. He's getting divorced. He's estranged from his kids, his father. Then you have the councilman who's shutting down and who this mystery arsonist. And then you have De Niro's investigator. Too overly complicated. The only star in this whole movie is the fire. You said it. The fire is like a monster. And the sound effect, it went from like photon torpedo when the first apartment blows up. There were parts where it sounded like a velociraptor. It seemed like a living thing. And if they had just spent more time, and the reason why it worked, I think, was because it's George Lucas's ILM that did all the special effects. Focus more on the fire. The fire worked. The side stories didn't work.
Right. Well, the movie opens and I'm like, oh, well, his father's about to die. And are we to believe that if we just dress Kurt Russell up in a mustache, he's magically older, and then we're not going to be distracted from the fact that he comes back as the elder brother Steven afterwards? I thought this was going to be like an executive decision, like Steven Seagal situation, where he dies within the first 5 minutes and you never see him again. But no, he comes right back.
Well, it's funny you mention that because when I talked to people about Backdraft, I was like, yeah, I'm about to watch it for the podcast. And they're like, oh, man, Kurt Russell is really great in that movie. And then he dies. And I'm like, that's it? Like, he didn't seem that great in this movie. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, he's alive again? And of all the things that they beat you over the head to explain in this movie, they really didn't explain that one to you. And it just seems like you could have had any actor play the dad, and it would have relieved a lot of confusion there.
Well, the crazy thing is, didn't they use a different actor for the young axe that comes out of the building?
It was just lazy. I'm surprised they didn't have like Kurt Russell like on his knees pretending to be the young boy, or have Billy Baldwin on his knees pretending to be the young version of Brian. Right. It was lazy. Did they think the mustache would fool us?
Okay, Billy Baldwin couldn't even play Brian as just Brian. Like, I don't understand how this guy got anywhere. He is tearing this movie apart. And you could have picked any Baldwin and they would have done better. You could have picked a Rappaport and done better. He's got this dopey face. He cannot keep up in any scene. There's a scene where he's like handed a dossier and he just looks at it. He's like, what's it? And I'm like, just stop, just go away. He seems to not be a believable hero, but also doesn't elicit any sort of sympathy. This guy was a total loss in this movie. I don't know how he got the role.
It's a good question. And one of the things that struck me as kind of odd, that I thought the tone was a bit all over the place. In Twister, we commented that it's not appropriate to drive the Winnebago into town that just got destroyed, like screaming, woo, blaring Van Halen. I know firemen love fire, but when that first fire breaks out, you got a bar full of drunk firemen, and he starts screaming. I think, is it Timmy? Who's the guy who gets burned?
It's Tim, yeah.
Yeah, it's a Tim. So Tim starts screaming, it's a Boxer 211. We can't miss this one. Yeah! He starts running down the street. They break out a hose. They start shooting it on Brian. What the fuck? There's a building on fire. There's people theoretically dying, and these dudes are screaming like they're just having the best time of their lives.
Yeah, not only that, they get to the fire scene, and they're like, it's okay, I'm a fireman. You just graduated the academy. Like, you're gonna run in there drunk off of Bud Lights and spraying down your friends with hoses and run in there and do anything? Are you kidding me?
I called a fireman friend today, and I'm like, dude, would you guys really be screaming about how excited you were? He goes, yeah. He goes, we would. He goes, but we wouldn't do it out in the open. He said firemen have something called truck talk, which is they'll all wait until after the fire. Then they're like, hey, let's go have truck talk. They get in the fire truck, and he said it turns into a circle jerk where all the guys are like, yeah, man, did you see I broke out my Halligan tool and I did a forced entry? He said it will happen, sadly, but not out in front of the homeowner or the person who just had a family member die.
So if there is one benefit of doing Backdraft, it wasn't watching the movie. It's finding out how many firefighters listen to this podcast, because people were pinging us left and right. And one of the listeners, Ryan Burdick, he's like, hey, I want to write you something about this, but I don't want it to turn into an essay. And it did. And I appreciate it. One of the things we talked about is he's like, well, you can ask me anything you want. I go, the cigarette thing. It's like, we're talking about they're showing up drunk, but they're also smoking all over the place. And I'm like, was that an artistic choice or what's going on? I go, can you take a cigarette into an arson investigation? And he's like, no. He goes, a cigarette is considered an ignition source, which is exactly what the investigator is trying to find. So it'd be like carrying a bloody glove into a murder scene. And I think that one of the things that we've talked about, we've talked about the acting, we've talked about the plot on this, but just the inaccuracies of firefighting. This movie is much like Top Gun. It's so wildly inaccurate in hopes of being exciting. But unlike Top Gun, it ended up not being exciting either. So it's like they failed on both counts.
Yeah, well, the biggest problem as far as inaccuracies go, that my fireman friend I talked to said, you would never take your mask off in a fire, ever. He said even 2 seconds in a fully engulfed fire, he said the toxic fumes would knock you out, could kill you. And he said, well, I guess it would be boring if it was realistic. It would just be a dark room. You wouldn't see much, and it would be firemen kind of crawling around. So it could have been much worse.
Well, are they trying to invoke that the bull, Kurt Russell's character, is unorthodox and takes risks too much and doesn't follow protocol, even though he's a lieutenant? Is that what they're trying to get across from, I guess, a story perspective?
Yeah, he's Maverick with a hose.
Aha! Well, the longest serving of all the men at Engine 17, John Axe Adcock, served under the McCaffrey's father and is like an uncle to the boys when their father died. He attacks fires head on, but is concerned about Stephen's unorthodox methods and disregard for safety procedures. Helen McCaffrey is Stephen's estranged wife and the mother of their son, Sean. Helen has grown fearful of Stephen's dedication to firefighting and the risks that he takes. While they are still in love, she is separated from Stephen to protect herself and Sean.
So, Brian, Billy Baldwin, shows up at his brother's house to see his nephew. Nephew doesn't even recognize him, runs away in terror with his fire truck, goes in the house, and then he just compounds it, makes it even worse by asking him where his dad is, and he goes off crying. Poor little Sean's going to be traumatized. He should not be having Brian around. There's no reason Brian should be in anyone's life or this movie.
Was he traumatized because he saw a stranger, or he saw a stranger dressed like he had just come from a Jimmy Buffett concert? Annie Baldwin should not be wearing khaki pants and sandals.
Did you get the vibe that he was like trying to step in and play daddy after this?
I thought there was going to be a love triangle. I thought they that he was going to like have an attraction for the wife or try and step in, and then that was going to cause more tension. It did not.
Yeah, I'm glad that the film's makers finally had the sense to draw the line somewhere. They're like, oh, and then we could add a love triangle. They're like, no, we've got enough here. Let's get back to the basics. But the big bad in this movie is not any one person. It is, as Big D mentioned, the fire. And that's a really hard thing to pull off. Like, you can make a shark a villain, you can make a dinosaur a villain, but fire doesn't have a mind, or you would think. But there's a scene where they walk into the fire and it knocks Brian on his ass, and Bull yells at the fire, and then he tells Brian, he's like, "Don't show it, you're afraid. You can't stop us, you bastard." First of all, props to Kurt Russell for actually being able to act against a fire. But secondly, I can't believe audiences didn't completely balk at the fact that this fire is somehow conscious.
Do you think that J.J. Abrams drew his inspiration for the smoke monster on Lost from the sounds that fire makes in Backdraft?
I thought it sounded like a fucking dragon.
No, yeah, exactly. It sounds like it makes monster noises.
But listen, yeah, but it works. What's the difference between fire and a tornado and Twister? They both turned into living creatures that had sounds that you had the extreme in Twister, who could predict where it was going to move, and he talked to it. It was just rehashing the same old thing. But what did seem genuine to me was the camaraderie between the firemen, the competitiveness between the station houses. It reminded me a lot of the military. So I think that part of it seemed real, but the whole side stories and the other drama they tried to generate didn't work as well. It would have been better if it had been just about the firemen, the fire, and catching the arsonist.
Well, Martin Swayzak is an alderman on the Chicago City Council. Swayzak hopes to be elected mayor, but has made budget cuts to the fire department. Many of the rank-and-file firemen believe the cuts are endangering firefighters' lives. Fire Department Captain Donald Shadow Rimgale is a dedicated arson investigator and veteran firefighter. He is called in because a number of recent fires resemble fires committed by a pyromaniac, Ronald Bartell, who has been imprisoned for many years. Brian is reassigned as his assistant after a falling out with Stephen. Rimgale manipulates Bartell's obsession with fire to ensure Bartell's annual parole application is rejected. It is revealed during an investigation that Swayzak was paid off by contractors to shut down firehouses so they could be converted into community centers, with the contractors receiving contracts for the construction.
So among this immensely complicated plot and tons of bullshit raining down from the sky is actually a surprisingly good performance by Donald Sutherland. I think that he steals the show in this movie. He plays Bartell, the arsonist. And basically you got De Niro talking to the aftermath of a fire, muttering to himself. You got Kurt Russell talking to fires. It was nice to see an actor actually trying to be believable, not buying into this hammy role. He's creepy, but he's not over the top. I thought he was just he was subtle. It was great.
Well, thank God Donald Sutherland was doing some acting, because all of his partners and his colleagues that were surrounding him were not acting. Can we talk about the parole board and how they were just like, yeah, seems fine to me. Yeah, he's only been in jail for like 6 years. Sir, would you say you're rehabilitated? Yeah, okay. And then I don't think Robert De Niro knew what movie he was in. And of course, Billy Baldwin's doing nothing but Blue Steel the entire time.
I mean, you got De Niro sitting there with a burned doll. You don't think that Sutherland knew what was coming? Okay, I'm going to be prepared for this. Last year, he pulled out the burned doll and I fell for it. I'm not going to fall for it this time. When he asks me, do I burn old ladies? I'm going to say no.
Do you want the doll or the hammer? You can't have both.
Yeah, but can we talk about this criminal conspiracy? What the fuck was that? Okay, so
I have no idea.
So his plan to make a shitload of money is to get some business allies to come up with a fake study that will shut down firehouses. Mm-hmm. How many firehouses are they shutting down? They're not turning them then again into like high rises with like expensive condos. They're turning them into community centers. How much money is there to be made in turning a firehouse into a community center? What are they? They're not putting in like high-tech equipment. What do they put? A couple foosball tables, a TV, and an area for the kids to play.
Yeah, arguably that shit's already in the firehouse.
Yeah. I was like, is this not the most convoluted yet somehow beneficial villain plan ever?
You're right. What was your plan? Well, I was trying to build community centers. Oh, shit. Okay.
Arguably, a firehouse is kind of a community center in and of itself. But like, okay, let's try and break down what's going on in the movie Backdraft. You've got the councilman who is trying to shut down the fire departments because he wants to launder money with business allies that are mysteriously being killed by backdraft explosions. His assistant is the ex-girlfriend of Billy Baldwin, who is the estranged brother of Kurt Russell, who's estranged from his wife and his son. And you have Robert De Niro, who's investigating the arsons, who then goes to Donald Sutherland's character to get help, even though and Donald Sutherland gives him help, even though every year he's pulling out this doll and turning away the parole. So I don't know why Donald Sutherland is doing this. Meanwhile, you got fires that are talking. You got Kurt Russell playing his dad. I mean, this movie is all fucking all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine if they did this with, like a war movie, right? Like the fire in itself is exciting enough. It could just be two brothers that are firefighters.
Right.
And one of them is, kind of a misfit and the other one is reckless. And then there's the conflict between the two of them and there's the danger of fire.
That's right.
On its own. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, I get the vibe that there was like two different movies that they melded into one. Later in the movie, the fire truck inexplicably fucking rolls over on its side. And I'm like, why did the fire truck just flip over and then nothing happens with it? Everyone gets out and runs to the fire that's like 10 feet away. I think in the other movie, the B movie, that had a plot point to it where they told him, hey, Brian, you got to drive safely. And then he didn't learn and flipped the truck over.
That's right. Well, then also, like, how many times is he going to flunk out as a probie, right? Spoiler alert, at the end of the fucking movie, guess what he is? He's a probie.
Yeah, and then also the alderman wants to get somebody to help the investigation. You don't pick somebody who has as much time in firefighting as I do. He was a fireman for like 2 days.
I was going to say the entire movie takes like over the course of like, what, a week?
Probably.
It makes zero sense whatsoever. Also, how is Adcox not ranked higher than Kurt Russell's character? Adcox seems like he knows what's going on.
It's like that old trope in every war movie where you've got the NCO who's like, battle hardened and gritty. He's really wise. Then you've got the officers who don't know what the fuck they're doing, but they're in charge.
Well, when Engine 17 answers a call in a high-rise, Stephen urges them to move in quickly to take out the fire despite Adcox's advice to wait for backup. Brian's friend and fellow trainee Tim Krasimski opens a door only to be met by a backdraft. His face is burned beyond recognition, but he survives. Adcox and Brian both blame Tim's condition on Stephen's reckless tactics.
So you mentioned before, Raj, about the fact that they're really trying to illustrate this recklessness. And I know nothing about firefighting. And even I was like, seems really weird that they keep running into these burning buildings and like fighting them from the inside. And so I asked Ryan, our listener, I said, so is that a normal thing? Do they do that? And he said, okay, so bigger cities like Detroit, they'll do that's called a direct fire attack. So they go into the building and they try to find the seat of the fire, which is like the hottest point. And that's super effective, but it's really dangerous. And there is a high risk for backdraft because you're changing the thermals inside the building and the airflow inside the building. And they'll use that if somebody's like trapped inside the building, like you're trying to save a life. But if there's nobody in there, usually what they'll do is what's called a transitional attack, which they'll go from the outside to the inside, which seems to make sense, right? You don't have to get inside the building where it can collapse on you. And then, of course, there's the most indirect one where they just drown it from the outside. And Ryan had said that firefighters, again, some of that truck talk is with the exterior attack, they just know they're going to lose the building. They say everyone gets to go home but the homeowner, that's a little firefighter humor for you.
But yeah, I got to tell you. So in the military, I was a combat engineer. So we would do demolition work. So we worked with all kinds of explosive, traditional and improvised. And one of the things I remember at sapper school that they taught us was dust initiators. If you've ever seen where the grain silos that they store grain in explode, this is also, you can use this tactically. So you'll pack an explosive charge underneath, and it can be any powder, cocoa, any kind of a real fine powder. The first small charge blows it up and disperses it in the air, and a second main charge will ignite it. We did it inside of a Connex, like the back of a semi-truck or like a cargo container. It squished this Connex like a tin can. So in the movie, it's real. Like, it was awe-inspiring. We did it on a small building, and it's like you took your hands and just crushed the walls inside. So guys flying around, to me, that seemed real, and it was frightening.
And you mentioned that, guys flying around, that human toll of all these explosions, which is really what we're supposed to get to in a drama. This is a drama thriller. We're supposed to care about the people. And so the victim in this scene is Tim. Tim takes a backdraft right to the face. It burns him horribly. And I think that we're supposed to care. And I felt bad. I was like, I think the way the music is playing and the fact that his face is on fire, I'm supposed to give a shit. But I don't really know Tim. Like, the only thing I've seen him say is it's a Boxer 211. And so instead of having engine top sex and training montages and stuff, maybe spend 5 minutes, let us know about Tim before he gets his face burned off.
Well, I mean, here's what I know about Tim. He likes to get drunk and show up to fire scenes unannounced that aren't even his firehouse. He also likes to, in the showers with his other firemen, just act like he's drinking all the water and then just spit it up. Just drink it all and then just spit it up and then just drink it all and just spit it up and just drink it all. There's plenty of shower heads, Tim. Go over there.
Yeah.
Why do you have to bathe right next to me?
No, also, as somebody who's done group showers in the military, you look straight ahead. It's like urinal etiquette. You don't swing your head around. You're not engaged. Tim is like, he's into it.
Well, when you put it that way, I'm really sad about losing Tim. I kind of hadn't really thought about it in its totality.
But why didn't they show us Timmy all burned up? Show him misshapen, deformed, what the fire could do. Then maybe we would have cared more for Tim.
Yeah, but instead they waste a bunch of time showing you things that are really obvious. I mean, this movie goes to lengths to beat you over the head with the things that it wants to tell you. One of the prime illustrations of that is De Niro when he's investigating the fire. He has to fucking set a fire to explain fire. Like, I understand that Brian is dumb, but he's not that dumb. De Niro, like, sprays the fluid and then he lights it on fire and he just goes into a crazy rant.
Hold on, this is an active crime
That's
scene.
right. And he's burning evidence.
They don't know who did it. And he's taking a flammable liquid. He doesn't just squirt like a little on the floor. He does it up the wall, the beam, the ceiling. That shit could have easily gotten out of hand. But he's not obviously thinking about Tim. And neither is Steve, because Steve got over it pretty quick, right? Steve goes home to see his estranged wife. He's busted up about Tim getting burned. And he decides to turn around and have sex with his ex-wife. And then make happy breakfast, eggs, and jelly with Sean? Is this bad timing?
I just want to take a sec. This is a complete tangent, but one of the things I noticed about that sex scene too is that he's in bed and he's like fully clothed. Like, they've been laying there for a while, clearly. He's got his jeans on, he's got his shirt on, And I just realized that, like, it was a dawning moment that I'm like, dude, I am 37 years old, because I get my clothes off before I get anywhere near a bed. And I was like, wait, I think back in the day, I have a faint memory of when you would actually take a woman and you still have your clothes on when you were getting in the bed still.
And then the next morning, Sean's got the best line. Mommy's crying.
Well, look, can we talk about Sean's character and how like dumb it is? Like, do you think the kid actor is just improving and he's just like, I'm gonna put jelly in my eggs and I'm gonna crack eggs, and Kurt Russell's like, oh, you wanna have the shell in there? You sure you want to do that, buddy? Where'd we get this actor from? But I think it would have been better had they made Sean like a little pyromaniac. Like, he's upset that his parents are divorced or separated, and he knows that his father is a firefighter. So if he goes around burning things, maybe he'll see his father more.
So he's the one behind all of it.
Yeah. Sean could have been the arsonist. Better movie.
Yeah, that's what we need. Another fucking 2 hours of character development for Sean.
I think Sean illustrates a conversation I had with Carrie last week, actually, where I said, is it better to have sex at your house or the other person's house? Like, which one do you prefer? Like, when you go home with somebody, you want to go to their house or you want to go to your house? She goes, oh, always their house, because then you can just leave whenever you want to. And I was like,
yeah, I agree.
And Sean is a prime example of why you might not want to do it at their house, because you're like, I don't want to be here right now.
Well, I mean, with the other option is the boat.
Boat sex.
Boat sex. Yeah.
Fuck, that's not a boat. There's like bottles. It looks like a homeless man lives there.
Let me ask you this. So one of our friends just started doing Airbnb in his camper that he has in his driveway. Do you want to
King B?
Do you want to Airbnb at someone's camper in their driveway?
In Arizona.
Yeah, in Arizona. There's no AC in this little camper. It's ridiculous. Like, there are people who do that, like in Europe, but like they're nice boats. They're actually in the water and stuff. Like, you can go stay on I guess that, but I'm not going to go stay on a boat in dry storage. That's ridiculous. It's the exact same thing as a camper in a driveway, is what I'm saying, folks.
You only do that when you're hiding from the feds.
Rimgale and Brian go to Swayzak's home to confront him, but interrupt a masked man to set the place alight. The latter attacks him with a flashlight, but is burned by an electrical socket on his back. Rimgale saves Brian and Swayzak from the house, but is injured in an explosion. In his hospital bed, Rimgale tells Brian to visit Ronald again. Ronald helps Brian realize that only a firefighter would be so careful as to not let the backdraft fires rage out of control.
Okay, this incredibly contrived explosion scene also has two major flaws. One of them is, if firefighters walked into a house and they're like, there's sparks over there, there's a gas line over there, they're getting the fuck out of that house. They're not be like, well, what should we do here? Let's look around. Secondly, it shows why you should never have De Niro doing action sequences. Like, at first I thought maybe he's just a really small guy, because he looks ridiculous in this scene trying to lift people and carry him out of the fire. And when he's pulling Swayzak out, Swayzak is actually running alongside him, but also trying to simultaneously look incapacitated. We're supposed to believe that this old, feeble De Niro is pulling him out of there. It ruined his tough guy image. I couldn't believe in him anymore. And then I think he was slightly redeemed by getting a spike through the chest, which was kind of cool.
Well, the other issue that I have with this scene is that as a fire investigator, you're more of like a CSI. You're as much a police officer as like, the guy who goes in and like tests for dead body chemical composition, like in the back of trunks of like Casey Anthony. Why are they trying to do detective work? Why are they trying to like, solve a mystery based on like what a real detective would be doing? That's not what a fire arsonist does. Arson investigator.
Because he apparently has tons of time on his hands. Jesus Christ. He's investigating like financial crimes. It's a fucking joke. And the movie at this point starts to get super heavy-handed, right? He gets burned on the back, right, by an outlet.
The guy who's in hooded clothing and still at the crime scene.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes. He gets burned by a sparking outlet. It does a perfect square shape of the outlet cover. It looked like a tattoo. And if we couldn't pick up on it as the audience that, oh my God, this scar on X's back is from the fire, they have to do an audio overlay of like, screaming and electrical spark sounds. I'm surprised they didn't do a flashback to him on the ground burning for people who might not get it.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I didn't remember that he got burned on the back. I could have used that flashback.
No, you didn't.
No, I did. I was like, why does Adcox have a scar on his back, and why is Billy Baldwin doing Blue Steel again? Yeah, like, listen, if you're Adcox, like, Adcox is a careful individual. He seems to be doing, if he, spoiler, Adcox is the fucking arsonist. So if he's setting up all these crimes, wouldn't he have also been so careful as to like not shower where you can see the burn mark on his back?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
fucking showered home.
Yeah, well, that is his home. He lives at the firehouse. He's that dedicated.
God, well, I got to ask you, who's a cooler, like, old guy? Is it Scott Glenn or Sam Elliott?
Oh, Scott Glenn all day long. Scott Glenn reminds me of what David Carradine would be, off of drugs.
I think I'd have to give some points to Sam Elliott, though, because he has sex appeal.
Fuck
There's
yes.
nothing sexy about Scott Glenn. Sam Elliott is just, he oozes sexuality.
Dude,
yeah.
I just got to remind you, Sam Elliott was in Roadhouse as Wade Garrett, and then wasn't he also in your two favorite movie, Tombstone?
All right, but let me break it down for you. So, if you know anything about the actor Scott Glenn is equally as badass on screen as he is, or he's equally as badass off screen as he is on screen. He does deep sea like free diving. With spear, like he does spear fishing, free diving, where he's admitted multiple times I've had to stick my spear in the face of a white tip oceanic shark before. He does skydiving. He does ice climbing. He trains in Idaho with members of SEAL Team 6. He's like this badass, mid-70s guy that's still very active. Sam Elliott he was a model. He was the Marlboro Man. He was you don't see Sam Elliott jumping out of planes or doing or spear fishing 30 miles off the coast. He's just he's got a good mustache. That's Sam Elliott. I'm going Scott Glenn all day long.
No, Sam Elliott's 3 years younger, and he looks like he's got more of a reach. I think Sam Elliott. I think he roughs up Scott Glenn.
Brian suspects Stephen of the arsons, but later spots a burn in the shape of an electrical socket on Adcox's back and reveals his suspicions to his brother just before an alarm. When Brian realizes Adcox has heard their exchange, he jumps aboard Truck 46 after borrowing some turnout gear. Stephen confronts Adcox about the deadly backdrafts during a multiple alarm fire at a chemical plant. Adcox admits that he set the fires to kill associates of Swayzak because Swayzak was benefiting from the deaths of firefighters. I'm sorry. This plot is gone off the rails. When an explosion destroys the catwalk they are on, Stephen grabs Adcox's hand while hanging onto the remains of the catwalk. Stephen refuses Adcox's advice to let him go, but Stephen loses his grip on the catwalk. Adcox is killed, and Stephen survives but is seriously injured. Stephen dies on the way to the hospital with Brian on his side, his final request being that Brian not reveal that Adcox was behind the fires until after Adcox receives a fitting burial.
So, again, talking about this movie just convoluting all sorts of things, you've got the climax of the action at the same time as the climax of the dialogue. And it's very peculiar because you've got these firefighters. These are veteran firefighters, and they're on top of a raging inferno chemical fire in an industrial building. And that's where they decide to have their little talk. And so I don't want to imagine how hot it is on top of this building. We're talking minimum 600 degrees on top of this building. They can't wait until the fire is out to have this talk.
And again, no masks, no safety gear. And they're having this conversation within earshot of like 18 guys around who are probably like, I think he's the arsonist. Did you hear him just confess?
How do they keep allowing Billy Baldwin on the fire trucks?
It's just fucking rando. It looks like anyone who's around the fire can just grab a jacket and just run up the ladder and go into the fire.
That's right.
And so again, they're on top of the building, but they're like, nah, we're gonna end it here, and then we're gonna go back into the fire. They can't really decide where they want to have the showdown or when, and so I think that they got a little carried away with the writing. So now we've got a secondary cliffhanger where you've got Adcox hanging off the catwalk, Stephen's holding his hand, and this is, I think, where we're supposed to really be on the edge of our seats. And I try to imagine myself in the theater, the sound booming, the fire, 20 feet high on the screen. And I still just don't care. Like, the movie's pacing is so poor. I just want it to be over. This scene really should have come somewhere in the middle.
What about the Poseidon adventure scene?
I was about to say the same thing.
Where he just happens to jump down an elevator shaft that's flooded. So we have some underwater fire. And then out comes Kurt Russell and does like a dive across the elevator shaft and just hits the shutoff valve. What was
Makes
this?
Zero sense.
Why?
Makes
Why
zero
did we need
sense.
this?
Oh, because the brothers are coming together now. They're They're now heroes, and they're going to go stop Adcox together.
I imagine it's not easy to swim in like 90 pounds of firefighting gear.
They don't even take off their jackets.
Yeah, but Brian might not be all that much muscle, but he's got the brains. He invents some sort of an anti-fire grenade when he like chips off the, I don't know if it's compressed air or an extinguisher, and throws it in the middle of the inferno and it explodes and like creates a clearing. Then he grabs that hose and that's my brother, god damn it. It was just, I mean, the cheese was falling off the screen. I was so disappointed in this movie at this point.
Okay, how does Kurt Russell die? So he falls onto the catwalk. And is he impaled?
Well, I texted today you guys a picture of that wound, and I texted it to Carrie, and I said, would you survive this? Would you walk it off? I couldn't even see what it was, but it looked like he was missing like a shark bite, like something had chewed one of his love handles off. What was that?
Like he had been out spearfishing with Scott Glenn.
I mean, he fell really, really far and landed on a metal catwalk. I think it was just the just internal injuries, and parts of him exploded out of his skin, it seemed like.
Whatever it is, it made his one eye red.
Dude, he looked like you know when you put a hot dog in the microwave for like 2 minutes and the shit just pops?
Boy,
That's
do
what
I.
It looked like.
Oh, I love microwave hot dogs.
Maybe it was the heat. The heat's what did it.
Well, after Stephen and Adcock's funeral, Brian and Remgale, with the help of the police, interrupt Swayzak at a press conference. Remgale questions Swayzak on a fake manpower study that led to the deaths of several firemen, including Stephen and Adcock's. They also state that Swayzak engineered the downsizing of the Chicago Fire Department. This effectively destroys Swayzak's mayoral ambitions. Brian continues as a firefighter despite the loss of his father and brother.
Again, so now, their job titles are fire investigator, financial crime investigator. Now they're actually like out policing. And it looks like they take their envelope or their manila folder of all of their evidence and just throw it onto the table. Wouldn't you want to maybe take all of your evidence and go to the police and let them make an arrest?
Well, they are the police. That's how Chicago works. and what's funny is at this point, the music starts, this horrible score starts rising in these triumphant notes. And I'm like, wait, this is a tragedy. Like, you've got the brothers dead. You got 2 dead firefighters. You've got, essentially half the city's on fire. You've got people disgraced. And it just seemed very, very, again, we've said it 3 times now, I think, tone deaf. It was further proof of how off the mark this movie is. And I kept thinking if they would have played slight parts of it differently, the relationship between the brothers, the music, the way things were shot, and maybe just tone it down, tighten it up a little bit. It didn't need to be 2 hours and 20 minutes long. They really could have had something decent at least. Yeah,
Hans Zimmer was a bit over the top. You don't, like you said, you've just lost your brother. You've had firefighters killed. This triumphant music seemed comically out of place. But I still think, even though it would have made the movie even a bigger mess, a shot of Brian returning to Stephen's house and maybe a hug with the wife and his son comes out. Because he's been talking about taking his father's role. Maybe he's going to take, his brother's role now as the man of the house.
Yeah, he could have been like in bed with Rebecca De Bonet in some khaki pants and sandals, just snuggling with her. Meanwhile, little Sean's on the side of the bed just trying to like light the comforter.
No, Sean's listening at the door. Mommy's not crying. Mommy's screaming.
And then they just cue the Happy Days end credits music. It's a wrap.
Well, speaking of a wrap, now's the time where we break out our Shat meter and give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to the podcast before, 0 wipes is the equivalent of like just a little trash fire, something that's fire retardant, something that goes down quickly and easily, and it's very nice. 5 wipes is like a multi-alarm backdraft, just destroying buildings. It's just absolutely disgusting. It's like eating a 5-alarm chili and then going to the restroom. It's messy. It's disgusting. So 0 wipes good, 5 wipes bad. We'll start with you, Gene. How many wipes do you give this movie?
Well, Raj, I think maybe 1 in 10 movies that we reviewed actually surprises me, where I think that, that was a great movie. And then it turns out I'm like, what was I thinking? This movie is terrible. And Backdraft is one of those movies. I was excited to watch it. I remember loving it as a kid, but it's cheesy, it's pompous, and it's the worst of what a big boom blockbuster is. It's all flash and no substance. They did have some impressive effects, and so I won't give it 5 wipes, but this is definitely a 4 wipe movie for me.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. we've done another Ron Howard film on this podcast, and that was Willow. And a lot of things we wanted to like about Willow, Val Kilmer, little people, dragons or two-headed monsters and witches and magic and little people, not the little people that like you are thinking of. I'm talking about like the little, what do they call them, Gene? Acorns? What are they called?
Oh.
What were they called? Little apples?
Fuck you. You talk about the brownies?
The brownies.
Brownies.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm not talking about small people. I'm talking about like,
the little French
exactly.
brownies.
You do not come French here. Brownies. No. You do not come here, stupid. So Gene, I think you mentioned that you fell asleep twice. I had to watch this today before we recorded, so I did not have the luxury of going to sleep. But I was on the verge multiple different times. This is a 4.5 white movie. My half score, the only thing that's preventing it is a roaring fire, and I do mean literally a roaring fire that keeps it at 4.5. So that's it for me. 4 and 4.5. Dick, welcome back. What do you give this?
So it's funny that you talked about Willow, because one of the things that we knocked Willow was a waste of potential, and that's what this movie was. You had a great cast, you had tons of money, you had a villain, a foe, an antagonist in the fire, which is compelling. Everybody hates fire, and you just wasted it. Instead, Ron Howard kept going back to the cheap cliches. The distraught mother in the building, and out comes Kurt Russell carrying the baby through the smoke. It was
unscathed.
Unscathed. I mean, there was a backdraft, like a big plume of fire that shot through the door. It was unenjoyable. The plot meandered. The Hans Zimmer score was over the top. For me, it's a 4. I would never watch it again. And I'm just scared. Maybe all Ron Howard movies are this bad.
Can I say one? No, because Apollo 13 is actually great.
You think that now? When did you watch it?
I don't know. It's been a while. That makes me scared and fearful. I will say another bright, shining moment of this movie outside of the fire is Clint Howard, Ron Howard's brother that he puts in all his films in bit roles. I thought he was great as the not mortician. He's the
coroner.
The coroner. Yeah, I thought he was great.
Yeah, he was.
That was the only bright spot of the movie. That being said, if we add up all of our scores and divide by 3, that gives us a Shat average wipe score of 4.16. Repeating, Big D, where does that put Backdraft on the Shat scale of movies?
So if you guys just heard that sound, that was Kerry Gross screaming in glee, because the 4.16 makes it a little worse than Blade Runner. At the 57 spot, it is now tied with Time Cop, Westworld, and Independence Day.
I feel terrible here because I enjoy Time Cop much more than this.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I didn't watch Time Cop, but I imagine it's better.
Yeah, there was no joy in this movie.
No joy. Except Clint Howard. Clint Howard was great. So now that you've got our score, now's the time where we talk about what movie we're going to do, as well as give our shout-outs. Gene, what is a shout-out?
Raj, a shout out is our way of saying thank you for listening to the podcast. If you go to shatthemovies.com, you will find a box for the shout out. You put your name in there and we will read it on the podcast. This week's shout outs go out to Megan, David Turner, Buy Viagra, Reese Nicholas, Varen Cook, Susie, Dope on a Rope, RV Business, Ferd from St. Mary's, Ohio, Ozzy Battler, Doug, and Aunt Pitty Pat. So thanks, everyone, for writing into your shout-outs. If you'd like to hear your name on the podcast, go to shatthemovies.com. Find the shout-out box, put your name in there, and we will happily read it with next week's review.
Big D, what is the theme for next week's movies?
So next week's movies was Best of John Candy, and the candidates were Brewster's Million, Uncle Buck, Spaceballs, and Cool Runnings. If you want to find out what we're doing, you could listen at the end of the podcast. We'll play the trailer, but we have somebody who's been writing in for quite a bit, Greg R. So Greg R. back in September had recommended our gambling categories with the hopes that Rounder would win, but it lost to Casino. Greg has come up with a few other good categories for us. He came up with Best Lawyer Movies, which is posted, and also Best of Matt Damon. And he wrote in and he said, listen, he said, I want to do Rounders. Is there any way I can get it pushed to the top? So I said, well, you know, if you want to make a donation, maybe we could do it. And he said, I'll do it. So Greg was kind enough to help support the podcast and make a generous donation of $50 to get Rounders put to the top. So we have a movie in the queue for next week. You'll hear at the end, but following that will be Rounders. And if anybody else has any movies that they really feel passionate about, you can contact us. And we're not in it for the money, but it does help cover the couple $100 a month to keep this ship afloat.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that Rounders. I don't think I've ever seen it. If I did, I don't remember. So I'm really hoping this one kicks all sorts of ass, and we can give Greg a top 5 a movie here, just a shocker out of the dark.
Don't fuck with me.
Don't splash the pot.
Splash the pot.
Yeah. So Greg was.
I'll work on my Russian impersonation from here until next week or 2 weeks from now.
I'm guessing that's something from Rounders.
Yes.
Don't splash the pot.
Yeah, so Greg was kind enough to help sponsor the podcast. We truly appreciate it. He's also going to submit a kind of an email where he tells us his history with the movie and his thoughts on it, why it was so important. And then also, I got to tell you, I threw up there like 2 months ago on the website a donation button for PayPal, just in case, some people wanted to help. I didn't ask people to donate money. And then the other day I was on PayPal and I noticed that 2 listeners had actually gone, hit the donate button, and it chose to donate $2 and $3 a month each. So thank you very much, Carmelita and Joanne. We truly appreciate it. It's nice to see that people care, and it's enough that we provide something of value to you. So we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to use that money to fund a study to reduce the number of firehouses in our respective Orlando and Phoenix areas so that we can convert those buildings into a money laundering scheme using only community centers. So thank you for that. That really helps out. That concludes. Oh, no, wait a minute. No, it doesn't. Big D, we have a voicemail.
Yes, we do.
No, so when we launched the voicemail initially, we weren't getting a lot. But then we started advertising it, and wow, it's exploded. We've gotten some really great voicemails from listeners like Marty, listeners who have shared
Coach
their
Marcus.
stories. Coach Marcus, who has been all over the Philadelphia Eagles, with showing pictures of him with the Super Bowl trophy. We love hearing your voicemails, especially with Westworld right around the corner. It's going to be the same number, so you can call in, leave your theories, and we'll play them on the Westworld Telegraphed every Thursday. That being said, if you want to call in, leave a voicemail. That phone number is 914-719-SHAT. 914-719-SHAT. Big D, how many voicemails did we get this week?
God, we got 8 of them. So we're gonna pick one for the week, and then going forward, we'll take a listen to them and pick the best of the best. But we appreciate everybody taking the time. So here's our voicemail of the week.
Hello from Canada, Shat The Movies crew. My name is Danny, and I love the podcast. I never miss an episode. I've got a quick question. What do you think would happen if a facehugger attacked a Mogwai after midnight? And I humbly request that Gremlins 2 get added to your roster. Just don't give it a wipe for its pre-movie Looney Tunes sequence alone. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to listening to it again.
Ooh, I like that. All right, so obviously, if a Mogwai had a facehugger attached to it after midnight, so it would turn into evil gremlin, but then it would spit out the alien hybrid of that gremlin. So it wouldn't be cute fuzzy gremlin; it'd be the Spike character. But that's the thing about the facehuggers, right? Is it meshes its DNA with whatever living creature the host, right?
Yeah, I think I'd be afraid of tiny little aliens.
Oh yeah,
because they replicate pretty quick,
right?
So here's a better question.
Ooh, yeah.
If the facehugger goes on the Mogwai,
right,
the Mogwai converts into a gremlin.
Correct. The
gremlin then merges the DNA.
Right.
He becomes a new alien gremlin hybrid.
Right.
If you get that fucker wet,
right,
he multiplies.
Yeah, but what time zone are we getting it wet in?
Shut up with the time zone thing.
How do you know it happens?
It doesn't matter.
How do you know it happens after midnight, depending on what time zone you're in? Is it because of the Earth's rotation? So it has to be midnight somewhere?
Whatever, that's a more terrifying thought of just a multiplying alien gremlin Spike hybrid.
Are you guys familiar with Vinny O from Los Angeles?
I am not.
So Vinny O is this guy who decided that he wanted to be turned into an alien. So he's been getting cosmetic surgery to do so.
Like what kind of alien?
Just like a space alien.
Like a gray?
Big
you
bug
eyes.
Look him up. All right. So far, I've got the list here. He's had 110 surgeries so far. So 35 whole body and face laser treatment to get rid of all the body hair. Cheek fillers, brow fillers, lip fillers, fillers for random wrinkles, Botox under the eyes, facial peels, and cryofacial freezing. And then he's trying to get $160,000 more to do genital removal, nipple removal, belly button removal, forehead realignment, ear pinning, nose job, eyelid revision, jaw implants, and cheek implants. His goal ultimately is to look like an alien. I think that's what would happen if a face hugger hit up a Mogwai.
Dude, but here's my fucking question. How do you have money? All of those are elective surgeries. How do you have the money to pay for those? He can't be holding a job where he's public facing. Does he work in a call center? Imagine that dude's in the cubicle next to you.
He spent already $50,000 to do this. Did we mention that?
No, I didn't mention that yet.
$50,000. This guy, so just do a Google search, guy turning himself into alien. The only search above that that Google will recommend is guy turning himself into red skeleton, which I'm afraid to look at those photos.
I think another possibility would be your dog, Albie.
That's correct.
Also kind of looks like a cross between a Mogwai and a facehugger.
That concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. Just search for Shat The Movies. If you want to check out what movies we've got upcoming and vote, our website is shatthemovies.com. If you want to write in, our email address is shatthemovies.com. We're everywhere. Fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and what's the new one, Big T?
Spotify.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by any of those, be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. You can also check out our sister podcast, Shat On TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, and American Gods. We are coming back for Westworld. We're actually going to record the second of our preview for season 2 right after this. Be sure to subscribe everywhere. You can find information on shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-host, Big D and Gene Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next week for this following movies review. Please be Spaceballs. Please be Spaceballs. Please be Spaceballs. Thank you. Good night and have and good luck.
There it is, planet Druidia. And underneath the air shield, 10,000 years of fresh air. We must get through that air shield.
We will, sir. Once we kidnap the princess, we can force her father, King Roland, to give us the combination to the air shield, thereby destroying planet Druidia and saving planet Spaceball.
Everybody got that?
Spaceballs, the movie.
Princess Vespa spaceship within range, sir.
Good.
What's going on? It's either the 4th of July or someone's trying to kill us!
Now we will show her who is in charge of this galaxy.
If you do not give me the combination to the air shield, Dr. Slotkin will give your daughter back her old nose!
Only one man and his trusted companion can save planet Druidia from disaster.
Okay, Eagle 5, coming in.
Lone Star.
First, they must learn the secrets of yogurt.
Yogurt? I am the keeper of a greater magic.
The Force?
No, the Schwartz.
Avoid capture on a distant planet.
Tell them to comb the desert, you hear me? Comb the desert! Found anything yet? We ain't found...
Battle the entire Spaceball army.
My hair! He shoved my hair!
Holy...
And escape the clutches of Dark Helmet.
I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Abandon ship! Proceed to escape pods!
What the hell's the matter with this seatbelt? When does this happen in the movie? Give me ball!
Spaceballs, the movie.
How do know you're not making faces at me under that thing. And may the Schwartz be with you.
917, no. 914-7. I've been memorizing this too. If you want to leave us a voicemail, again, that's 917. No, fuck. If you want to leave us a voicemail or fuck it. I'm just not going to say it.